And what we start to find out later and later as we progress in recovery is that if we push it away, if we fight it, more often than not, it gets stronger. It fights back. It wants our attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so can we start to have the relationship with what this fear is about? I wonder what you're afraid of there. And instead of pushing it off and ignoring it or avoiding it, it's working with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting curious about it. And that word curiosity is so important, because when we become curious, we become open-minded. We become non-judgmental. We become almost a little bit welcoming of what we might find.
Brian, this will be a cool topic today, especially as it was something that I more so recently tapped into when I got into recovery. And I was a little skeptical, I think, in the beginning, but it's this whole somatic experiencing therapy. And for the guys who haven't listened to this, I'll have Brian kind of define it, because rather than me butcher the whole thing, I'll just have Brian kind of into its proper definition. But I'll tell you my definition of it from an experiential standpoint. When you see a somatic experiencing therapist, at least the one that I saw, quite interesting, right? The goal wasn't to talk. The goal was to feel. And I thought I felt feelings because I see a sad Budweiser commercial with a lost dog on it, and I would start crying, so I always believed the story that I was in tune with my feelings, Brian. But as I started realizing there's a difference between crying at stuff and being good at feeling stuff and knowing what to do with your feelings, being aware of the feelings. Just because you cry at one thing doesn't mean you feel all feelings. And so, I think there was a lot, I bring that story up, Brian, because there's a lot of resistance in me when I first started this. Cause again, I heard from all the guys, all the books that, that men like this have some learning to do in that area. And I just disagreed. I was like, oh, no, that's not me. That's other guys. That's not me. Well, into recovery, it was me. And there were definitely some feelings that I felt and some feelings that I did not feel. Brian, can you describe for the listeners, when we talk about somatic experiencing therapy and just somatics in general, what are we referring to when we speak to that?
Yeah, well, I appreciate the question, Roland, and I'm really glad to be with you. I might start with just a little background on myself. Sure. That I think maybe a personal perspective might be a great way to answer that. I got into recovery from compulsive sexual behavior and sexual addiction about 15 to 16 years ago. My marriage was failing at the time. I had been unfaithful on a couple different occasions, acting outside my marriage, and was using pornography compulsively. And my wife at the time basically laid down the ultimatum saying, either you get help or I'm gone. I'm out of here. So I chose to get help. I started with 12-step, and I also started intensive therapy. And my therapist was great, right? He was also a recovering addict himself, helped me see some things that I had no idea was going on. But most of it was talk therapy. And talk therapy is a needed thing. It's a great, I'm not downplaying talk therapy at all. But I found as I made progress, I plateaued. I got to the point where, okay, it's good to talk about this. Talking about my addiction is helping me. I was able to gain some freedom and some sobriety from it. But I felt like there's a lot more there. And I can't quite get to it by just talking. I mean, talking has been helpful, but there's so much more there. And I started to look at other modalities, right? Other interventions, other ways of reaching things. And one of the things that kind of cued me was during some EMDR sessions.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine most of your listeners might be familiar with EMDR.
Yeah, that and brain spotting are pretty common.
Yeah, pretty common, right? So during the EMDR, he would say, okay, what are you noticing right now? And what do you feel in your body? I really got curious about that. Like, why are you asking me what I feel in my body? Like, what does that have to do with anything? I just want to quit looking at porn. Just tell me how to do that. And he started, gently and slowly sharing with me, why do we want to tune into the body? Why do we want to get more familiar with what's happening beneath the level of the neck. And as he did that, I started to uncover some things that I just didn't know that were there. I started reading some books. I read Bessel van der Kolk's book called The Body Keeps the Score, which is a great place to start.
Yeah, it's boring though. It's boring as hell, but if you can make it
there. Maybe even just the first couple of chapters, right? And the way he talks through it with his patients.
Yep.
And so that started getting me excited. Like, maybe I can get a little deeper, because my trauma, Roland, was adoption. I was relinquished, given up by my birth mother at birth. Mm-hmm. I had an experience of abandonment that went to my core, and I couldn't. It was pre-verbal, it was pre-memory, couldn't process it with anybody. And so I started to put this together, that if I want to get some freedom from this, and at the time I got some sobriety, but honestly, I think I was just white knuckling it. Mm-hmm. Just like, can I get another month? Can I get another month? Come on, can I get another month? And that was good. That was a good start, but I could see this isn't going to be long-term. You know, this isn't going to be
between sobriety and recovery, right? Sobriety, exactly. Not doing something, recovery, not wanting to do it. Right.
Exactly. And so I got turned on to the somatic work. I started seeing a somatic therapist that's much like you did. Started seeing a specialist that specialized in somatic work. And she put me on the table. She put a weighted blanket on me. She said, "Can you feel the blanket on you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Can you feel it?" I said, "Well, I can see it there. I see it there." And she said, "You know, Brian, that's not what I asked." I said, "Can you feel it?" And I said, "Honestly, I can't feel it." And she said to me words that I'll never forget. She said, you're just not present in your body. I think she might have used the words, "You're dissociated." And I didn't know what dissociated means, but she said, "You're just not present to what's happening." And I said, "Well, okay, what does that mean?" And she said, "You know, the healing process for you, because the wounds are pretty deep, is going to involve getting in touch with what's happening in you." Right. It's not that you're going to go in, Brian, and just cure things by noticing, okay, my stomach's really, upset right now. But through this process of working with the body and being in touch with the rhythms of what's happening there, you're going to be able to unravel some of what's happening. And it's that slow unraveling process that got me very, very passionate about the somatic work. Right. It's not a cure-all. It's not an overnight, boom, I'm good. It is a slow unraveling process of, not just feelings. I don't have to feel angry. I don't have to feel my sadness and my tears, but I can just notice how my body's feeling in this moment. How it is for me to.
What you said there is kind of what my therapist did on I don't think it was the first session, maybe like the third. I like how she worded it, because it got me bought in, and I'm sharing this for all the other high achievers listening, because, when you first go, it's just like, oh my gosh, so you're going to ask me all this nonsense. And like, your brain, your high achiever brain's just sitting there thinking,
right,
well, let's get to it. Like, what the heck's happening here? What, are you just bleeding me dry? All my money I got. I mean, I'm going to come here and sit in your office for, but I'll tell you this, here's how I got sold. It was like the third session. And I actually had gotten, my wife had gotten dysregulated, that same day, that morning. And my session was at 2. And I came in and, she said, "Oh, how are you?" And I kind of told her about, we just had this thing happen. And my wife got all distraught, and saw this woman at the gym, and she goes, she goes, "Oh, hey, hold on, stop." And she goes, "How did you?" Because I was telling her about the situation. I said, I knew my wife. I knew right when she saw this woman that she was going to become triggered. And she paused me there. She said, "Roland, how did you know that this was going to be a problem?" And that was where I really started buying into this, Brian, because I said, well, I don't know. I guess I just felt it. She's like, "How and where?" Right. So she started asking these questions. And so we kept talking. And she we didn't necessarily get down to where in the body and articulate it and what it felt like. We didn't quite get there. I kind of just left it at, I don't know. I just felt it was how far I got. But here's where I got sold. She said, Roland, I want you to put a pin in that. And I want you to remember that, in your body, even before your wife gets in the room, that this is going to be a problem for her. Now, why did that? Well, I share that story because I finally got what she was doing there. What she was showing me was, Roland, there's things going on in you all day long that are there to help you, valuable assets that you are either unaware of or misinterpreting or not even finishing. I always call it, Brian, finishing the job. What I mean by that in this particular situation was, now that she put that pin in me and I knew it was going to be an issue, this happened just a couple, the issue I'm telling you about happened a couple of years ago when we were in recovery, but I used this same tool just 2 days ago. We were in a coffee shop. There was a woman who kind of meets the criteria of what my wife has decided to become triggered about. I felt it. I saw it. Unlike last time where I just panicked, I was like, oh God, oh God, oh God, this is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. This is going to be bad. You know what I do now? Because of that pin that my somatic therapist put in, I saw it. I made sure not to look. I put my arm around my wife and I looked at her in the eyes and we started talking. And because I was like, hey, I know this could be an issue. So what can I do about it? And I just wanted to share that quick story because, I know this sounds weird to pay attention to feelings. I know that sounds, for a lot of you, it's like, oh my gosh, this sounds like it sounds like a lot of time. It sounds like potentially a waste of time. This sounds like maybe not something I need quite yet. But I share that story to say what I then learned going deeper and deeper and deeper into somatic therapy with her was there are a lot of things going on in me. And a lot of them are really powerful assets. And I can almost predict, and this sounds kind of funny, I can almost predict the future. If you really get tapped into those. My body's trying to tell me things. And historically, Brian, I was either ignoring them or just not knowing what they were. Now, every time I feel that feeling, I think to myself, what can I do to comfort my wife so that this doesn't become a problem? And I thank my therapist for that moment, because before she put that pin in that feeling, I felt that feeling. And you know what I did? I panicked because I was like, oh God, whole day is going to get ruined now. She's going to implode. And now those things don't happen because I can better meet the situation. So I just wanted to share that story quickly to kind of further anchor what we're talking about and the value of it.
It's a great example, right? And it kind of is. It's kind of fun to chuckle at I can predict the future. But if you think about the hair on the back of your neck standing up, right? You don't know exactly what's going to happen, but something in the body is telling you, just be on the alert here. Something is off. Something's a little off. And I think a lot of people can identify with that. Just the sense that I have that I can feel some bristling happening, maybe some goosebumps. Something's not quite right.
Well, Brian, can I bring this up and have you speak to this? So on the flip side, so we just talked about an example of me feeling a feeling that was designed to help me predict a potential problem. I want to take the flip order, which is kind of more of what you and I did when we used this to recover, which was there are also feelings that I was feeling that were angst and fear. So I would come into the situation as a high achiever. I'd be in this room. There would be a couple of guys come in who are better than me. And I would start to feel a bit, I'd kind of be keeping my eye out over them. Hey, who are they talking to? Are they talking to any of my other competitors? Are they going to steal some of my referral partners from me? Right. So I have this unsettled feeling in my body that I need to go do something. I need to make sure that I make my stance. I need to go protect my referral partners from these people so that they don't steal my business. I bring that example up because I felt so what my somatic experience therapist would have done was brought me back to, okay, Roland, talk to me about that fear and angst when those guys first came in. Where did you feel that? Now I bring this example up because it's the flip side. The other one, we were talking about a very valuable asset of, oh gosh, here's a potential threat to someone that I love. This other example is different because what it gave my therapist was she wanted a follow-up question, which was, why is this guy scared and intimidated by two other humans who may or may not even know who he is? So the reason I bring up that example, and I'd love your take on it, was that was a different kind of breadcrumb. Rather than showing me an asset, it was showing me I have a deep-seated fear of other men who could be better than me. Where's that coming from?
Yeah.
And what do we do about that? So Brian, kind of speak to the flip side. Can we follow feelings back that are indicative of an unhealed or a faulty brain pattern that's causing us problems?
For sure. Yeah. It reminds me, as you share that story, Roland, it reminds me when I was a fighter pilot, right? I graduated from the Air Force Academy, top of the class, able to earn myself a coveted spot in one of the elite pilot training bases in the Air Force, got an F-16 assignment, a premier fighter jet. So I'm at the top of the pilot heap, right? I mean, as far as pilots go, you can't really get any higher than to fly a world premier fighter jet. Mm-hmm. So I get to my fighter unit and I'm having very same feelings, right? I'm feeling like these guys are better than me. They're going to outdo me. I had never been outdone in my life until I got to the fighter unit where there were 20 other me's there. And I got really worried. I got really afraid. I'm not going to be the best here. These guys are better than me. I'm not going to fit in. I'm kind of afraid of the power of this airplane. And the fear was so deep in me that it drove compulsive behavior, right? The fear was so powerful and so palpable that in order to continue to live as a fighter pilot, I had to take up some pretty serious coping behaviors. And so the flip side of it would be to begin to develop a relationship with what's coming up in the body, right? We start out often when our first couple of experiences in the therapist's office is, okay, you're making me aware of this thing that I got. It might be anxiety, it might be fear, but it feels tense and gripping. And we want to avoid it. We want to push it away. We want to stuff it. We want to ignore it. And what we start to find out later and later as we progress in recovery is that if we push it away, if we fight it, maybe it hangs in there, but more often than not, it gets stronger. It fights back. It wants our attention. Mm-hmm. And so
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
What I think the therapists in this field and possibly your therapist is after is, can we start to have the relationship with what this fear is about? Okay, there's these two other guys, they're men just like you. I wonder what you're afraid of there. And to, instead of pushing it off and ignoring it or avoiding it, it's like working with it. Mm-hmm. It's getting curious about it. And that word curiosity is so important. Mm-hmm. Because when we become curious, we become open-minded. We become non-judgmental. We become almost a little bit welcoming of what we might find, or at least open to being welcoming to what we might find. And when we start the curiosity and welcoming, start down that road, things really start to shift, right? The relationship with that fear and that dread that these guys are going to take something from me. I might not be who I thought I was. I might be unseated from my position of best achiever in this area. It starts to change. It starts to shift. The intensity of it feels different. And the really cool thing is there's not the excessive drive for the coping behavior. Mm-hmm. That drive starts to change. Mm-hmm. And that is so worth it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of the challenges in this space, the sex addiction space for high achievers is, there's a lot of this talk of, oh, you're doing this as a coping mechanism. You're doing this to avoid feeling feelings. And I think the challenge that a lot of my clients have is, I'm not doing this to cope. My life's awesome. I'm on vacation 30 weeks a year. I make, $80,000 plus a month. My wife's sexy and great in bed. My kids are, I'm a staple in my community. These guys are like, no, I'm not avoiding anything. I'm not coping with anything. My life's awesome. I think I can speak to that clearly because that was me. I'm like in
Mm-hmm.
these rooms with these guys, and I'm like, I'm in the wrong place, man. You guys got issues. My life's fine. All I'm doing is sleeping with some women. You guys are the ones with the problem. But here's the thing: is what Brian and I are talking about now is, again, I think the misunderstanding often is that it's always fear, sadness, my life sucks, I'm too poor. We tend to focus on these like really sad emotions that these unfortunate individuals are feeling. But again,
Mm-hmm.
a coping mechanism it's a coping mechanism, or using something to not feel, doesn't have to be because you're a loser and your life sucks and you don't get paid
Right.
enough and no girls like you. A coping mechanism can be, a coping mechanism can be, I constantly have to keep my foot on the gas, because in this
Yes.
world, the more I accomplish, the more women who like me, the more men who want to be like me, the more of those individuals I can collect, the more valuable I am. And so the thing you're coping with is, I wouldn't even necessarily say the pressure of having your foot on the gas. I would say you're coping with the life of, I can't take, it's unjust for me to take my foot off the gas, because if I did, I would not be collecting as many people's attention and admiration as I could, and then therefore my life would not be at its fullest potential. And so
Yep.
again, I bring that up because a lot of guys do, they haven't, my clients have really amazing lives outside of this issue. Things
Yeah.
are really great in their life. But again, just to clarify, when we're talking about coping, it doesn't always need, isn't always my life sucks. It can also be, I'm not feeling super awesome about myself today because two meetings got canceled. This person ended up going with one of my competitors, so I lost that contract. Um, I'm not getting enough amazing stories about myself today. What can I do
Mm-hmm.
to get some wins under my belt? Who can I flirt with? Who can I text? Can I get her to send a nude picture to me? So again, I just like to reframe that, because I think,
Mm-hmm.
again, there's this tendency to think, oh, I'm not that, my life's awesome. Again, coping comes in a lot of shapes and sizes. I think for successful men, it's usually, I need to be doing all these things to be successful. And then if any of these other things happen that counteract that story, I need to make up for it in some way. And sometimes it's overworking to make up for it. Other times it's, man, where can I go get some quick attention and validation from someone, right? So I just want
Yeah.
I want all the guys listening to expand their view of coping, because coping is just simply your brain coming up with an interesting strategy to make you feel the way you want to feel. And in those moments, if you're feeling behind, not as successful, this guy's better than you,
Yeah.
your brain's going to come up with, a coping strategy could be, I'm just going to work that much harder. I'm going to listen to more
Right.
podcasts. I'm going to read more books. It's not always something in response to a negative feeling.
Totally. And I'm glad you made that point. You know, it reminds me, and I felt very much that way as a high achieving pilot, right? A lot of the things that were happening with me were beneath the surface and I wasn't aware of them. And so I commonly ask this for my high achieving clients that I have. They might come and express something very similar to what you're expressing, Roland. And I'll say, yeah, when your foot is on the gas pedal all the time, what happens? What happens when you're constantly reaching and striving for the next thing, the next sale, the next achievement? What is that like? And 9 times out of 10, they'll go, oh, Brian, it's really tiring.
Mm-hmm.
It's exhausting, quite honestly. I thrive on it. I love it. This is my life. I really love living like this. But quite honestly, I feel exhausted because the gas pedal eventually you're going to run out of gas if you're
Mm-hmm.
always on the gas pedal. And so the way I might reframe this a little bit and shift the perspective is we need rest. Our body needs breaks. We need to be able to let down a little bit. You know, I think that can even help with the achievement, even to higher levels, is getting some intervals of rest and some intervals of downtime and letting down. And so what we find in my fascination with this as a high achieving person myself is that on the go, constantly needing high activation, high stimulation, high achievement, revving at 500 miles per hour all the time, which I'm talking about me here. What happens is it's very difficult for us to let go, to settle down, to let down. Right? When we start to come over the curve and we crest the hump and we look at the valley below to let down and settle a little bit, we go, that doesn't feel good to me. I don't like that. I need to keep this going. And it may even connect, I don't know if you might relate to this or not, but it might even connect to a deeply held notion that the last time I let down, something bad happened. And I can't allow that to happen. It might not be a conscious awareness of that. But I'm starting to find that with my high achieving clients, there is a deep sense, deeply held within, like the last time I let myself settle a little, something bad happened. And
and we live in a culture of performance-based praise, right? I mean, parents are, my parents,
yes.
They wanted to be great parents, and they tried really hard, and I give them all the credit in the world for trying hard. But I mean, we were a performance-based praise household. I mean, they never said, I don't like you if you don't get good grades.
Right.
They never said that. But I mean, they sure definitely told me, get good grades, don't squander your money, save your money, work hard, get a good job, save for retirement. I mean, it was, they never said, if you don't do those things, I won't love you. But again, it was definitely, man, I am so proud of you if you do, right? Which is essentially conditional love. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is, right?
Totally.
But I think that when you were talking, the other thing that I thought about too was, so for the guys listening to this who've set themselves up pretty well, I was really blessed. I retired basically at age 28. And what I mean by that was my businesses were running themselves and on track to grow. I mean, they didn't really need me to be there. I had people in place and had the thing pretty much figured out. So then I got time freedom, right? And then I was, golfing, screwing around, meeting people, so improving myself, doing different kind of self-growth, self-improvement things. And then that got old. And then I was like, oh, well, I got money freedom. Now I have time freedom. Now I'm going to go get location freedom. So I sold my wife and I sold our home. And we lived out of 2 suitcases. I've been to this day, I've been to 98 countries officially as of Andorra, which hardly counts because it's teeny.
I'm envious. I'm
in 98 countries, and we've lived for over 2 months in 18 of them. And so I got this location freedom. But my point, I brought up that point of that story because a lot of, there might be people who've done that or people who are aspiring to do that. And, there was this promise that I kept telling myself of, when I get financial freedom, I'll be happy. And then I was like, kind of back to where I was. And I was like, I'll get time freedom and then I'll be happy. So I automated everything in the business. And I was like, I'm still not happy. Well, I'll just travel and spend 2 months in Santorini and 2 months in Peru. And, then I'll be happy because I've literally had everything that everybody is working so hard for. But I bring that example up, Brian, because, when Brian and I are talking about letting go and just resting and relaxing, I know a lot of people look at those 6 years that I spent traveling as rest and relax because I had access to money. I really didn't have to work. But again, if you went into my inner workings, into my body, my foot was on the gas full blown. What's the next country? What's the next Airbnb? What's the best Airbnb that we could, right? I mean, it's really, if you tracked all the way through, and I just bring that up, Brian, because there might be some people listening who are like, oh, no, I'm at the country club. I'm golfing 6 of the 7 days a week. I got plenty of self-care. I'm floating in the float tank. I'm doing my cold plunge in the morning. I'm journaling. And so a lot, there are guys who listen to this and it's like, no, I read 100 books a year. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm doing all these self-growth things. There's tons of self-care again, but I hope you guys, when you heard me talk about that, my foot was on even when I was full-time traveling, my foot was on the gas the whole time. It never came off. And I think, I bring up the performance-based praise and I bring up the endless pursuit of more to just say, there's nothing wrong with getting more out of life and enjoying it. That's not what I'm saying.
Not at all.
I'm just saying to ask yourself, are you being and enjoying this, or is it, is it constantly this pursuit of, my mantra was, how big can I get my autobiography before I die? That was like always on my mind. How interesting can I get my book? And, I thought that was a great mantra to live by, but I paid the price for it. It's eventually part of those stories where the endless pursuit of more was more attention, more admiration, more sexual experiences, more other people being envious of me. That's the problem with the undiscriminate pursuit of more is I can't simultaneously get endless amounts of attractive women's attention and also simultaneously pursue being the most incredible, loyal husband and father at the same time. The two will conflict. And here's the sad part is pursuing, being a wonderful husband and father is a relatively muted experience. It really gives you a sense of peace and wholeness, which on the rush scale is actually relatively muted. I would argue peace and wholeness blow peak experiences out of the water, in my personal opinion. But on the surface, when you're deciding, which one do I do? Oh, well, my wife and kids, they're gonna be there. They'll be there for the rest of my life. But this woman, she if I don't take advantage of this and have that peak experience, she could be gone, and I might lose my opportunity. And then they make that decision because, again, if their mantra is, I want this full life, this big life. But, but when you go to the inner workings of the brain, and I tell that last piece of the story to start showing the flaws is, I know it sounds admirable and I know you feel like you're just living this amazing big life and you're probably receiving praise from other men, maybe your parents on how much you've accomplished. But again, when you work in the inner workings, that constant spinning without you stopping and really feeling and seeing what the heck's going on. If you're like a lot of the guys listening to this, you go into that disclosure day with the wife and you're like, it wasn't that bad. There was this girl and that girl, but it's not. And then all of a sudden you like take the time to really think back the timeline and you're like, 15, 16, 20, 30, 38. I mean, it's like, oh crap. You really look back and you're thinking, man, I've unconsciously been compulsively doing things almost without my knowing. Right.
Yeah. And I so relate to what you're saying. And as I hear you share that, Roland, what comes to me is this values clarification, right? Where you're saying, hey, it's really important for me to get attention from women. That builds me up and it makes me feel good. But I also have these other values. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a family man. And there seems to be, for most of us at least, a time of reconciliation where these values begin to clash. Right? They're no longer compatible. And for many of us, there's a time of values clarification where we say, okay, I now see, like you said, that moment of full disclosure where it becomes clear it wasn't 3 women. It was actually more like 193. And when we see our partner doubled over on the floor in the fetal position as we share this, there's a moment of clarity where we say these values that I once had, they're not fitting with my life anymore. They're not fitting with my life anymore. And we begin to get some motivation to change, some motivation to try something different because it's becoming clear this isn't going to work for me. I can't continue to live both of these lives. I'm going to have to choose one or the other. And it's then that we decide, if I'm going to make this choice, it's probably going to be not super easy. I'm going to need some tools. I'm going to need some assistance. I'm going to need some some allies to help me with this. I'm probably not going to be able to do it alone. And those of us then that come alongside you as allies help with the process of what's worked for us, what's working for us. And I got to tell you that as a high achieving pilot, I was also an airline captain at a major US airline. And right after 9/11, I led a team of pilots in an industry leading cockpit defense program. I was the one that created and taught pilots cockpit defense. We were going to equip our cockpits with tasers, but the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, didn't allow that for whatever reason, and instead they approved guns. and so we transferred our cockpit defense strategy to accommodate firearms instead of tasers. But all that was, once again, 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, because my vice president was telling me this is going to be the best security program any airline has ever seen. And guess what, Brian? It's up to you. And man, 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, drinking sodas and coffee, I was in the office. And like you said, it took a toll. It started to wear me down. There's no way that I could have the value of being recognized and achieve and be this king at the airline and also have my family, my wife and my kids. And as these values conflicted, I learned through my therapeutic process that I was going through at the time, I'm going to have to find a way to ease off the gas pedal a little bit. I might not have to put the brake full on, but if I can just figure out a way to ease off the gas pedal a little bit, maybe I can get enough space here to put this back together. And it became clear to me, I'm going to have to find some ways where I'm okay resting. Because the interesting thing is, Roland, sex is like pseudo rest. It's a form of rest. Any form of sex involves the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the part of our nervous system that's responsible for allowing us to come down. It is foot off the gas pedal. And sex, biologically, scientifically, is very much dependent on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest part of our system. It's the rest and digest part. And so for many of us high achievers, sex is the way that we get our rest. It helps us take a break from our fast-paced life. And if we really do want to make some changes, which most of us do, we want to make a few changes here and there. Sure, we got great lives, but we need to make a few tweaks here and there. We want to figure out some ways that we can begin to factor in some creative ways to rest that might not involve as much sex as we've been having, right? Ways that we can allow our systems to come down just a little bit without having it to be compulsive sexual behavior. And that way we can begin to rest, and our home life is starting to stabilize as well. And we start to get both.
Yeah, I think to me, when I look at it, I think a lot of high achievers hear their therapist telling them to slow down, and they do not want to slow down. Here's how I would rephrase it. Don't stop doing all the stuff you're doing. A lot of it's amazing. So keep at it. Here's how I would rephrase it. There's a lot of fulfillment from a lot of the things that you're not honoring at the level they need to be honored. And when you start to create space for those to be honored at that level, one of which is you, when you honor your needs, when you really start honoring all these things in your life that deserve more honor, that aren't getting your attention, you'll be rewarded with a whole different sense of fulfillment, peace, just this, I call it wholeness, right? It's just this feeling of, I'm doing the right thing right now. I know this doesn't look exciting. I know society, and everybody wouldn't say that this particular activity is, it's kind of like when you're crawling on the ground playing with your daughter or something. When my daughter's, she's 5, and man, when I'm with her though, it's just like, I could, like, an hour before, things could be, high, just not going well. And when I'm on the ground playing with her, Yeah, I know in my body, I'm like, this is where I belong. Even though the high achiever in me is like, doesn't like it. For that moment, there's more of me that likes it. And I just don't listen to my high achiever's point of view on it, because I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I get what you want, but man, you haven't experienced wholeness, man. You like peak experiences, and that's great. I like them too. But wholeness, man, to me, wholeness wins every time. Hey, Brian, this was awesome. If people want to get in touch with you and find out more about this, where do they go? Is there a website? Tell us how to reach you.
Yeah, my website is called livingcolorhealing.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you can reach me right there. You can send a form through the website. So it's livingcolorhealing.com. And you can reach me at livingcolorhealing@gmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
You can Google my name, and my Living Color Healing practice will come up.
Yeah, his name, for those listening, Brian Klink, Klink. Brian, this was awesome, man. I appreciate the approach. I love your passion around this too. You remind me of my somatic therapist. I think the reason I gave her a couple tries, even though I was like, this is weird, I don't know if this is for me. She was so passionate about what it was going to be able to do for me. And you share that same passion. So I appreciate you sharing your time and knowledge with us today. I really do. Thank you.
You're so welcome. I am passionate about it because it's working for me.
Yep.
I'm a work in progress. I don't have it all figured out, but it's been the next step on my journey from recovery. And it's working for me. I'm making deeper and deeper discoveries.
No stone left unturned. Your wife's too important. Recovery's too important. When you hear those guys who relapse 5 years out, 10 years out, don't leave some of these stones left unturned. Those will be the ones that come back and bite you in the ass. So give this, for those of you who have access to this, I'd recommend giving it a try. It's definitely, it's one more thing to not ignore that could further protect you from, maybe having your life explode for a second time. And I always say, they give you a second chance. Asking for a third, I don't know. That one's a lot harder. Well, thanks, Brian. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Roland.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been great chatting with you. I've been really enjoyed this time with you, and it's great getting to know you. So thank you.
Thanks, Brian.